Right, part 3, let's crack on with this. Gosh, this camera's on the laptop's pretty dodgy. Makes me... And I've got a shiny bald head at the moment. So this part 3, and this is going to be from me leaving school. So I was in high school and I did my exams. 14, I was nearly 15, I believe. And I decided I was not wanting to go on to further education. I didn't hate school, I just didn't, I had no university plans, so I decided I did my exams and wanted to leave. It was that simple, really. So I left high school and I had secured a stupid little job. A job's a job, but I was doing electronics. I was soldering these circuit boards for a very futuristic device, and I was working for this chap called Bob Turner. Bob was at the time interested in the console gaming industry, Mega Drive, Nintendo, the whole thing, and he had started a very, very, very small business. So I met him through a little advert, and before he knew it, I'd left school. My dad was okay with that. I got this job with Bob Turner. It was only, I can't remember, £60 or £70 a week, which is nothing. So my dad wasn't happy about that, but he accepted that I'd left school. And in the back of my mind, I sort of thought, well, Bob's doing this thing with the console games. I know my stuff, and I've got experience, and maybe we can sort of join forces, and that's exactly what happened, really. So I'd left school, I was working for Bob. I was doing the electronic soldering, which was a very boring job, but it was alright. He lived just outside Thurso, and I used to get the bus there in the morning, and I knew that the console industry was going to be huge. I mean, now it's bigger than the film industry. It's huge, it's massive. But at this time, it was still early days with the Sega Mega Drive and the Super Nintendo, and being the main consoles that people had. So Bob and I sort of became partners in this venture. My dad was proud of me. I think he realised that he'd been quite controlling with my sister Karen, the eldest, so he sort of let me get on with things, and I was going through the typical teenager thing, listening to music in my room, and we started the business. So me and Bob used, I think it was his dad's or his foster dad's credit card to order things, and I put a little bit of my gaming knowledge and stock into it. And we used to go to the town hall, Thurso town hall, and do buy and sell and swap. Swapping was the big thing. You come along with your game you don't want, and we'll give you, pick one of these ones, and that will charge you whatever, £5 or whatever it was, and that was a big deal. And we had adverts around town. We were called KT Consoles. So there you go. So my dad kind of let me get on with things. He wasn't very keen on Bob. He said, if me and Bob were going to become a partnership in this business. Bob was married with 2 kids at the time, and so I was young. My dad wanted this to be in writing and to be a legally binding thing. And we never did get that done, although we did go and see a solicitor on a couple of occasions. So with trying to get money together for the business, we couldn't get loans. We tried with one of the banks, the Clydesdale Bank. So my mum and dad secured a loan for me and Bob of £3,000, £4,000, something like that, and we opened a shop above a cafe called Sandra's, and put adverts in the well-known video games magazines, and before you know it, we were rolling. We'd started, and we were very popular. The kids at school would come down at lunchtime, And I must hurry up with this and stop rambling. So the shop was open, it was doing really well. I was 15, nearly 16. At that time, I'd just started going to the pubs, more or less, somehow getting away with being 18 years old. I had a friend at the time called Ben Tate, and Ben and I were in the shop one evening just by ourselves playing video games, and he had a pipe with some cannabis. And that was my first introduction to cannabis, which I then started smoking every single evening, every day. I wasn't hooked, I wasn't addicted, but I enjoyed it. It was a very social thing. So I also started smoking cigarettes, and I guess this is a part of me, sort of my addictive nature. So I was having 4 beers a night at that point. We were going round to sort of the stoners' house to smoke some wacky backy with a bunch of people, and it was nice, you know. We'd go and I'd have my 4 beers and we'd smoke pot and go home, and that was fine. It was really social, you know. There was no problems initially. But I was going to the pubs and I got involved with a whole bunch of lovely people. But I then started to take speed amphetamines. Took my first LSD trip, which was lovely, a really memorable first trip. I enjoyed it. And that was the start of me drinking, taking drugs, and going out. You know, kids do. Most kids, I would say, by the time they're at school, high school, 12 to 15, they're going to come across cannabis, and they're going to come across other drugs, and they're going to try it. Most will. It's not through peer pressure. I think just most have a general interest, and as far as I'm concerned, to this day, cannabis, marijuana should be very legal. Very legal. In fact, I think most drugs should be legalized, in honesty. So from 15 onwards, I'd started hitting the pubs, and we were doing parties. And I've written here, the parties, we'd end up at a house, and socially there were some great times, some wonderful people. But me being gay in the small town, when guys and girls were getting together at the end of the night to be intimate, sleep together, you know, explore, I couldn't do that, you know. My after party didn't go that way. That affected me more than I realised, and it did. I just had to get wasted more and more and more. So by the end of the evening, when, you know, boy meets girl, I wasn't happening to me. Now, this isn't why I turned alcoholic, but my parties continued without going to bed with anyone. So, you know, I was drinking a lot, and I was taking a lot of drugs. It's written here, drink at that time was already my drug of choice. It was drink first, then the drugs would happen. And at 16 I decided I was going to try and find who was gay, and there was a well-known gay couple in Thurso, in this small town, who were together. I phoned one of them up very drunk one night, and woke up in the morning and the phone went, and I was late to open the shop, which was a common thing. And this chap said, do you remember calling me last night? You're Keith, aren't you? And I said, yeah, I'm Keith. And then the feet, you know when you wake up with a hangover and all the memories flood back. Oh God, I did that, no, I didn't do that. So I'd left a message phoning this guy George, telling him all about, I'm gay, I want to speak to someone. And I did. I spoke to him and his partner, and they were very nice, but I was very young. I was 16. So that was one of the first experiences of coming out. Also at that time, my very close friends knew Dave Cuthbert. I told Dave Cuthbert, who was a really close friend. He was somewhat surprised, I think, at the time. I had to get drunk. Mind you, we were drunk most nights, to tell him. We were pretty much drunk every night. I'd shut the shop and we'd go out to the pub, and, you know. So I started to search for men at this point after telling George, and at the time we had something called teletext on British TV. I put a small advert on there on the dating thing, and I got a few replies. So my first sexual experience, and this is not, I guess most people's first sexual experience, gay, straight, whatever, is never going to be what they anticipate. And I was in a town, or what is now a city, called Inverness, visiting a friend, and I'd had quite a few beers, and I went off to buy some cigarettes, and I bumped into this old drunken man walking home, and he was literally a dirty old man. He was a chimney sweep. This is just weird, but this is what happened. And I met him, we started chatting, and we ended up going round the back of his house into this stairwell and just sort of masturbating each other. And then we ended up in his house, and by this time I thought, oh god, it's an hour had gone, and I just told my friends I was away to get cigarettes. Someone knocked at his door and I freaked out, and someone was wanting to come in and have a threesome, and it was all too much, so I ran away. Went back to my friend's home in Inverness, and the next day I was sick. I felt so ill. It was what I wanted to happen. It wasn't exactly my first choice, you know, this older chimney sweep guy, but it was quite horny, quite dirty, and it was a sexual experience. You know, that was my first. There you go. From the adverts on teletext at that time, so between I think about 15, 16, 17 years old, I went all the way to Cardiff to visit a guy in Wales. 3 days of uncomfortable Cardiff. I hated Cardiff, and I didn't click with this guy. I also went to Edinburgh to meet a chap who came from London to Edinburgh. You know, this was back in the day. You didn't have internet dating. All we had was teletext adverts, and I took a weekend off and went down to Edinburgh to meet this guy from London, whose name I can't remember. He was an older bloke. He was rough and tough as nails. Used to be friends with the Cray brothers. This is true. This really is true. And he was asked to be part of the Great Train Robbery. He was one of the first people I met who I knew was a full-blown alcoholic as well. When we met in this pub in Edinburgh, he met me off the bus. We went straight to this gay bar. He had like 10 gin and tonics within the space of half an hour, and his eyes were yellowing. He was very nervous. This was his way of relaxing, but he was absolutely an alcoholic. I recognised he had a drink issue, but I never questioned mine. I was too young to be an alcoholic. Never crossed my mind. But, you know, I recognised that me being in the top of Scotland, this small town as well, this is going to be hard work if I'm going to meet anyone. And, you know, I can't just go to Inverness and have a random meet with a stranger when I'm drunk. You know, I need to try and have a way to meet people. And that was all I had at the time, was teletext and dating adverts. No one in town was going to really come out. Mind you, I did come out. But I'll go on to that in the next stage. But I will say this, I've written, my hygiene at this time, my self-respect, it wasn't there. I was not looking after myself at all. I was not your little clean-cut twink, you know, effeminate gay guy. The urge to get drunk, to get high, and then to swirl in the chemical world was strong. I loved ecstasy, and I loved dancing. I loved house music at that time. It was a big deal. Going to Inverness, clubbing, and have all the little parties we had, or whole weekend parties we had. You know, I loved it. But I couldn't have a relationship. I mean, I couldn't, you know, sleep with a girl. I wasn't going to pretend to, and I wasn't going to try. The lucky or unfortunate thing was I enjoyed my own company. I can still handle being alone. But panic attacks had started to become frequent, and no wonder. You know, I was smoking pot every night, I was drinking. I was uncomfortable with what was going on in my head. I was going mad at a very early age, very quickly. Speed, ecstasy, acid, mushrooms, magic mushrooms. I consumed a lot between 14 and 19. I quit smoking pot on a daily basis about 18, 19 years old. I'll leave this segment at that. and we'll go on to another part later. But that's sort of where, when it all started, my drinking, taking drugs, socializing, and started dating or trying to do something with my sexuality and meet men between 15 and 19 years old. Okay, that'll do it for now.